Now, let me officially welcome you to this year's cohort of the Climate Finance Academy. We had over 8,700 applications this year with an acceptance rate of around 2%. So you are among a very highly selective group of participants, and we are incredibly proud to have you here. The Academy is designed to do more than just transfer knowledge. It's about creating a community. You'll be connecting with peers who share your commitment to climate action, but who also come from very different regional, academic, and professional backgrounds. And this diversity is what makes the Academy so powerful. I really encourage you to use this space to ask questions, to challenge ideas, and to take advantage of the global network you're now a part of. Remember, you're not just future leaders. You're already leading in your own spaces. And this academy is here to give you the tools, the confidence, and the connections to make that leadership even stronger. With that, let me now hand over the microphone to Ahmed Maher, our Deputy Director, who will walk you through how the academy is structured and what you can expect in the weeks ahead.
Thank you so much, Kiara, for giving me the floor and leading the academy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Ahmad Nair, and I am serving as the Deputy Director of the Climate Finance Academy for this year. And in the Climate Finance Academy, we will have a lot of work to do. The program, I will run you with the program and what we are going to do throughout these 2 or 3 months. The program officially will start from September to October with a session in each round. You have the schedule already, and the session is scheduled for a couple of weeks, and each session will be hosted, as you know, online via Zoom. The participation in the academy is very important, and it is expected that everyone of you to attend these sessions in order to make sure that fruitful um, gain from the academy itself. We understand that there is difference in the time zones and sessions that may not meet your schedule, but we appreciate the attendance because we need the attendance to be at least 80% of um, the academy. If you are experiencing any issue with attendance for any reason, please let us know at least 12 hours in advance so we can be able to share the recording and do whatever necessary to help you to gain from the academy itself. Each session is very interactive. We'll hear from different speakers, high-level speakers, and academia, and also youth. But there is also space for you to ask questions, participate, with polls that will be shared, and reflections. We also have um, you with us because it's Academy for Youth and by youth. We want you to see you as learners, not only as learners, but as contributors to the discussion. We expect our expectation itself is very simple. Be present, be curious about the academy itself, and work together. We have the project that you can um, contribute to, and we are expecting to have that, and also the breakout groups. The strength of this academy comes from the diversity that we have from all over the globe. So let's work together, share the perspective, and listen deeply to others. So in short, in this 2 month journey, blending from experts' input, peer-to-peer learning, designed to give you both knowledge and confidence to engage in the climate finance space, and also to be aware of what is happening in COP 30, especially and beyond. With that, I'll go to the next part and highlight the most important elements of the academy, which is the final project. The project itself will be like this um, distributed to a number of regional group of 4 to 6 people together. You will research how the academy or how the climate finance works in your region and looking at things like mechanisms, access, gaps, key actors, and real world examples. The final output of the academy is around 200 um, words written report, which you will submit as a team. This project is designed to help you to connect with the global discussion. We have the to have the reality of what is happening in your own context. We have a deadline for this project, and it is expected to be November 7th. But don't worry, we'll be sharing all the instructions about this project and templates and the group assignments later on. So, no pleasure yet, no pressure at all. Just, it's just like heads up for what you are going to experience during the whole academy. And of course, we'll be there to support you. With that, I would like to welcome you again, and I hope you are enjoying the conversation and had the chance to meet people from different parts of the world. The purpose of this academy is to remind you that the strength of this lies between the diversity that we have, the statistics that we have published, and over these weeks, you will continue to learn from each other as much as from our speakers. Now, I officially open our academy. It is great honor to um, hand the floor to Kiara, who will introduce our um, academy and walk us through the rest of the day, the session. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ahmed. So now we're going to do something a little bit more interactive so you can get to know each other because, as Ahmed mentioned, we have an extremely diverse academy. And that way you can get to know your fellow participants a little bit more. So in a moment, we'll divide you into breakout groups of about 8 to 10 people. This is a chance to introduce yourselves, share your backgrounds, and discuss a few of the guiding questions that we've put up here together. On the slide here, you'll see some prompts to get the conversation going. So firstly, you can start with introductions. You can tell your group who you are and where you're joining from. You can share what you personally hope to gain from the Climate Finance Academy and how your peers here might support you in reaching that goal. We also want you to reflect a bit on what climate finance means to you and how you first came across the topic. And finally, we also want you to think about the most important actors in climate finance, be it global, national, or local, and how they affect your region. You'll have around 10 minutes for this activity, so we'll see you back in the main room shortly, and we hope that you enjoy the discussions. Please give us 1 minute while we set up the breakout rooms. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We hope that the breakout rooms were very productive and that you got to meet a lot of new people and got to speak about a lot of new things. For now, we would be grateful if you guys could let us know in the chat some things you learned about each other, things that you didn't know about different regions of climate finance, different actors that you learned about. It would be really incredible to learn from you guys, and maybe we can later, I'll say them out loud as we get going in the chat.
I got the chance to join few. Moving between the breakout groups, and I see very interesting insights and the enthusiasm that is coming from the participants and their expectation and some of um, the discussion that is being discussed in the breakout groups about what the participants want. Kiara was like what related to what is being discussed in the negotiation area. I'm not sure. I didn't mention at the beginning, but currently I am in representing YOUNGO in one of the climate finance meetings on the Standing Committee on Climate Finance. And what I'm seeing, listening to in the negotiations rooms and the expectations from the Global South is is actually in what I heard in the breakout groups related to what the Global South is calling to. So let us know, dear participants, um what was the interesting thing that you got and the key takeaway from that 10 minutes breakout groups that you got. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ahmed. It was incredible to know that you guys spent the breakout rooms that you had very productively and that you had a good time. So now back to our presentation and to officially open our academy. It is my great honor to introduce a distinguished speaker that we have for today, Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin, who is the United Nations Special Envoy on financing the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Dr. Mohieldin has held some of the most senior roles in global finance. He was the United Nations Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP27, an executive director at the International Monetary Fund from 2020 to 2024, and the First Minister of Investment of Egypt. At the World Bank Group, he served as Senior Vice President for the 2030 Development Agenda and Managing Director overseeing development, finance, and private sector programs. Alongside his leadership roles, Dr. Mohieldin is also a professor of economics at Cairo University, a senior fellow at Brookings, and a visiting scholar at Columbia Business School. Few people have shaped the global conversation on climate finance and development as deeply as Dr. Mohieldin. So please join me in giving him a very warm welcome to this year's Academy. Dr. Mohieldin, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much. I hope that you can see me well and hear me well. And many thanks for the very generous introduction that may have raised the expectations beyond what I'm going to share with you. It's a great pleasure and honor to address YOUNGO. I've been always a fan of what you do, and I learned a lot by interacting with you for many years now. And I'm requested to speak about finance, climate finance, and I'll share with you 8 clear, I hope, messages and areas of interest and concern at the same time. And all of them are going to be subject to the discussions in Berlin. I'm got a good first-hand confirmation of that through a recent visit that I did to Rio and Sao Paulo just a few days ago. So in finance, we can always talk about the insufficiency of funding, and it's a fact that the requirements are widening, broadening, especially in areas related to adaptation, when you cannot really get easily the private sector to step in. I remember when we were preparing for COP27, the contribution of the private sector was around 3.5% of total. And now, unfortunately, is declining further. And we need really to articulate ways in order to get the private sector incentivized to do more in the areas related to adaptation. When it comes to decarbonization and mitigation, in advanced economies, high-income economies, many of the emerging markets and developing economies, you can see a growing significant role for the private sector in either in public-private partnership or in direct investments through private equity firms in areas related to decarbonization and energy transformation. There are many areas in between adaptation and mitigation that are subject to the discussions that we'll be seeing in Brazil. One area of focus when we talk about climate finance is that there is no dichotomy, unless a false one, between climate finance and development finance. Climate finance is development finance, and there is a good book by Nick Stern, one of the gurus of the economics of climate, which is actually a title of a book that he authored many years back. He's doing another one just to confirm that the climate agenda is the growth story of this century. So if you are serious, as we should, about funding mitigation, this is Sustainable Development Goal number 7. If we are serious about funding adaptation, this is about food, SDG 2, about water, SDG 6, about a great deal of investment that we need to have in the resilience of cities, like SDG 11, and it should create jobs. All of that should create jobs, which is SDG 8. I like to share with you, after this highlight of the issues of the insufficiency, and there is an inefficiency as well in finance, because with some institutions, it takes forever until we get funding out of the door. I remember the president of the World Bank a couple of years ago was saying that it takes 27 months from a dollar to get out from the door, not just for climate, but all development finance. He claimed later that this figure had improved, but again, it takes a while for many countries to get their funding. So this is an indication of inefficiency. And then there is another area, which is basically about the cost. In many cases, you would be finding countries borrowing to fix other countries' problems. Developing economies, the majority of them are not the main emitters, and when it comes to carbon dioxide and its implications. But again, they are required to borrow in foreign currency, sometimes even in commercial terms, to fund adaptation. So this is the kind of landscape that we're dealing with. The Baku to Belém report and the $1.3 trillion that needs to be bridged, there are many ways to deal with it. And I'll just highlight with you 8 areas of work, assuming, of course, that there will be better commitment to climate finance from the advanced and rich economies to respect what they pledged and committed to in Baku for the 300 billion. But there is a room for blended finance and de-risking mechanisms. Many of the areas of work would require public-private partnership mechanisms. They would require debt swaps through many institutions doing them to reduce the burden of debt reliance. They would require as well some insurance and guarantees and bearing of first loss in order to allow the private sector to flow in areas that they have been hesitant in doing business in. This is the first point. For that to happen, there is a need for reforming the MDBs, the multilateral development banks. In one of the reports of the independent high-level panel of experts led by Nick Stern and Vera Songwe, they called for doubling bilateral finance, tripling finance from the MDBs in order to facilitate the quadrupling of the current private sector finance. Private sector finance will not flow unless the MDBs are going to be doing more than what they do, especially in de-risking, in technical assistance, and capacity building. And for that, that needs great deal of investments in the paid-in capital of the multilateral financial institutions. The third point is the optimization of vertical funds, like the Green Climate Fund, like the Climate Investment Fund, and what's so-called the vertical funds. Again, these funds are very much needed and critical, and I'm happy that many of them are adhering to the rules of engagement when it comes to parity between climate finance for adaptation and climate finance for mitigation. But again, many of these funds are with very limited resources, and that needs really to be augmented. The fourth is basically about boosting national capacities. You can reform all of the international financial institutions in the world, but if you do not really have the readiness of countries to receive these funds, and we have seen it, that in many of the countries they may get commitments for funding, but because of limited capacity at home, they cannot really absorb such funds. They cannot absorb the technical, because of lack of technical assistance and lack of capacity building. So here, issues related to improving policy frameworks, improving institutions, getting the house in order, because you'll be seeing some signals to climate that are in conflict with what is being actionable at the local level. These countries need as well to prepare their pipeline of bankable and investable projects. And that gets me into a related area of work, which is the NDCs. As we know now, we are in this stage of what's called NDC 3.0. The problem with the former NDC, the nationally determined commitments and contributions, that many of these NDCs were bureaucratically designed. And then after designing them and releasing them, we go and ask the private sector to go, assuming that these NDCs are investment strategies. And we know that many of these NDCs were not really investable. So we hope that the current NDC, the 3.0, they should really be opening the gates for the private sector, from the domestic private sector to the external private sector, to help supporting the ambitious programs, especially in the areas that the private sector has the comparative advantage in. That gets me into the point number 6. So I covered 5 already. The blended finance, number 1, reforming the MDBs, number 2, optimizing climate funds, number 3, boosting national capacities, number 4, and the investability of NDCs, or making NDCs investment ready. That gets me into number 6, which is basically the Baku to Belém roadmap, which needs to be aligned with the ambitions that we talked about with finance. We need to have better scaling up. We need to bring not just the public and the private sector together, but there is a greater role for philanthropies. We need actually as well to reflect the optimism that many of the developing economies and emerging markets have in their NDCs, and we need to match that with finance, with technology, and with incentives for behavioral change. This gets me into number 7, and I only have another one, and that's it. The use and scaling up of innovative sources and instruments of finance around the world, including in what I saw in Brazil, of impressive experiments and projects, including in carbon credit markets, especially after what we saw in 6.2 and 6.4. We have seen many good examples in countries around Africa, from my home country, Egypt, to what I saw in Cote d'Ivoire, in South Africa, and what was shared recently in the Africa Climate Summit. The same I would say about Asian countries. But at the same time, can we make an emphasis on the importance of scaling up and replication? Because you can always have these experiments, but as we have seen, the widening gap needs scaling up and deepening of the efforts beyond boundaries of some particular countries. And then the very final part, which I mentioned briefly within the Baku to Belém roadmap, is the role of philanthropies. With the withdrawal of ODA from many countries, the official development assistance, who have seen the freezing of funds from USAID, the cuts, the major cuts of ODA of many European countries, there is a growing reliance on philanthropies to bridge gaps and to provide at least some quality funding in order to support the work in the climate agenda. That needs better dialogue, not just with government, but with people like the members of YOUNGO here, to direct those who have the funds, not just the big names that we are familiar with, like Gates or Ford Foundation or Rockefeller and other big names. But in our countries in the global south, there is an emerging breed of philanthropies and foundations that need this kind of guidance from those who are in the field and those who know the priorities. So having said that, as always, I look forward to engaging further with you from now until we meet at COP30. And there is a lot of work, including using another hat, not just the UN, my hat as the chair of the board of advisors to GFANZ Africa, which is the Glasgow Finance Alliance of Net Zero. They are reaching out not just to the private sector, especially in areas to capacity building. They are reaching out to people like you who have the familiarity and the priorities and the ambitions as reflected in their communities to guide on areas of work. And there will be two major engagements, a bit of propaganda here in a moment on behalf of GFANZ, that they will have meetings at the margins of the G20 in South Africa. And there is going to be a big announcement as well of a meeting to take place in Egypt in areas related to capacity building, carbon credit markets, and mobilization of capital. That's not going to be just limited to Africa. It's going to be having as well partners from Latin America and Asia as well. So having said that, I'm admiring again your work, and my engagements with you have been always fruitful in the past, and I would be more than happy to engage with you even further in the future. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohieddin, for your incredibly powerful, inspiring, and honest remarks. I think it's incredibly important to highlight both the inefficiency of the system as well as the tools that we have to fix it for the future. And your 8 very clear insights on how global finance systems can evolve to support sustainable development will definitely stable our participants going through the academy. And personally, as a student myself, thank you for sharing book recommendations, because I saw many comments in the chat asking about it. And it really is an honor to begin our journey this year with your perspective. Unfortunately, we can't clap in a virtual environment, but I assure you that the clapping emojis that are filling my screen right now would fill up an auditorium. So thank you so much, Dr. Mohieddin.
All right. Hello. Yes. Can you please share the comments or the question, because I'm using a poor mobile phone here that doesn't have adequate capacity. So if you can read to me the questions or comments for me to react to them.
Yes, of course. The main question that we had was asking again about the name and the author of the book that you mentioned.
Nick Stern, Nicholas Stern. Actually, his book is going to be released very soon, and is going to be linking the efforts of climate finance to the efforts related to growth for development, and proving by evidence that there is no dichotomy or conflict between taking climate action seriously and taking development action seriously. I highlighted some of the issues already, and there is another book actually, but I didn't like to brag too much about it. It's going to be released in few weeks that I edited. It's on climate finance. So that covers all of the aspects that I mentioned, and we have more than 20 authors and co-authors of chapters, and it's going to be released soon as well by one of the top German publishers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohieddin. Does anyone have any other questions they would like to ask? We have time for one more question, maybe. If you send it in the chat, I'll read it out.
Yeah, I have two. We have two hands here.
Let's see. Afise, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yes, go
Good
ahead.
afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr.
Good
Mahood.
afternoon, sir. Hi.
I appreciate your insights. From your discussion, I'm getting a question that is really of concern to me with regards to the readiness of our countries, particularly in the global south. If I get you correctly, my question leads to the fact that does it mean that any particular country that does not get its act right with regards to planning its internal climate environment, with regards to NDCs and other internal mechanisms, that such a country will not enjoy from or will not be able to tap from the global climate finance?
Okay. Great question. Thank you so much. Can I have the second question and I'll answer them both?
Ahmed, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Kiara. Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud. On behalf of the Climate Finance Academy team, we are grateful with your participation. My name is Ahmed. I'm the Deputy Director of the Academy. I'm from Egypt. It is absolute honor. My question is, what is the area of engagement in the initiative that um, you have mentioned, and also if there is a way of submission through the use submission of our point of view to that conference or that area or initiative that you have mentioned, and if there is any opportunity for youth participation from YOUNGO to be participating in that conference that it will happen in our country, Egypt. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much. So for the first question, for countries, even if they are low-income countries, it's all about domestic capacity, readiness of institutions, have some good coordination between the main bodies, especially the sectoral ministries, the local communities, and Ministry of Finance. This, if you manage to get this triangle together, I think you can really benefit a lot from the technical assistance and whatever left still of ODA. But more importantly, now for development and climate together is the ability to do better on the domestic resource mobilization. So a bottom-up approach is being more appreciated than ever before. Getting the act of the budget of the state together is more appreciated than ever before. Building a pipeline of investable, not just bankable projects is very much needed as well, because part of the problem that we are suffering from, that we are not relying adequately on public-private partnerships and private sector, and we resort to the government to do everything, and governments are with limited resources, so we end up on debt. So I think we need really to have this kind of build-up from the very beginning, right, with better consultation with local communities, including youth. This is one area. So this is what I meant when I talked about the readiness of countries to engage. And the NDCs, when they were prepared in the spirit that they're going to be taken further by the leadership of countries, even if they are low income. There are many low income countries with incredible political leadership and political national leadership. On your second point on the initiatives, I can think of many, including, I would say, we have a fantastic champion now for COP30, and I hope that you'll be engaging with him and his team. And I would say that the Climate Champions team, which is part of the UNFCCC and the Marrakesh Partnership, allows you through organized vehicles to suggest propositions and to follow them up and to build on some of the good suggestions and proposals and to get feedback. So I would really encourage to use the Climate Champions, UNFCCC, and the Marrakesh Partnership as recognized, formal, effective channel to do this work. And then at the country level, we'll have many opportunities to mention that. But in Egypt, and I bet in other countries, there started to see some civil society, private sector-led movements towards net zero, including, and you can Google them, and they are called Chapter Zero, that you can engage with them. In addition to many of the partnerships led by the youth in the country. I'm just taking Egypt as an example because you can ask me about any other country and I can tell you as much as my memory can help me in retrieving, I can tell you what they are doing as well. So there are many of the existent chapters and movement that could really be aligned, that you can align yourself behind them. Don't work alone in this. This is a complicated kind of environment that needs people like you to work together, not to work in silos, and to push. And as one of the old motto of the of fans of football, including Liverpool, you say you will never walk alone on that. So don't work alone. Don't just walk alone. Don't work alone. It needs this kind of collective effort as you do it with YOUNGO.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohiuddin. On behalf of YOUNGO, on behalf of the Finance and Markets Working Group, and on the Climate Finance Academy, and of course, our participants, we want to give you the sincere thanks. We know you have a busy schedule, and we really appreciate the fact that you joined us today.
Thank you, and see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Great honor, pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So now, to continue today's program, I'm delighted to introduce Shitis Jha and Catherine Sota from the YOUNGO Finance and Markets Working Group. They will present to you what is climate finance, give you a basis on what we will be talking about in this academy, a foundational overview, let's say, and they'll frame all of the sessions that we have ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kiara. I hope I'm audible to everyone. All right, perfect. Yeah. So, first of all, congratulations to everyone for being selected this year. And I can see a lot of happy faces on cameras. And I said this in the breakout room as well, that to the ones who have not turned on their cameras, we can see happy smiles on their pictures. So the purpose of this session is to take a step back. And Mr. Mahmood have told you a lot of good insights into climate finance, right? Now we have to take a step back to see what it actually means. So what we'll try to do now is try to give you a context, try to give you some basics and foundations as to what abbreviations and terminologies and technical terms that a lot of speakers and a lot of reports use. Before that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Kshitij. I'm from India. It's almost dinner time now. So good evening, everyone from India. And I work as a climate finance associate in a public policy consultancy in Delhi. And I am also part of YOUNGO. Coordinate the NCQG and Baku to Belem roadmap working group here, subgroup here. And can we have the next slide, please? So before answering what is climate finance, let's go back and ask ourselves this question, that why finance is central to climate ambition. Let's start with this question and imagine that you have planned the world's greenest house. Okay, solar roof, rainwater harvesting, all the works. Now everything is planned. Now imagine you have no money to build it. That's where most climate projects are today, without finance. Brilliant ideas, but only in papers and PowerPoints. Finance is basically what brings these climate solutions on the ground and also scale it up. Not only that, it also builds trust. That's what I've written here. So when developed countries say that they will support the vulnerable and actually deliver on the money that they owe due to historical responsibilities, it keeps the climate talks credible and creates the trust in the whole negotiation and consultation space. When they don't, well, let's just say that it's that one friend who keeps saying that I'll pay you back next week, right? So it's kind of that situation that happens. Finance also unlocks private money. A little public finance, we can say, that acts as a starter in a car engine. If you put public finance in a project, it will help you bring much larger flows from private investors. And finally, and then the last not the least, it's about equity and justice. The communities least responsible for climate change, like the small island nations, the least developing countries, the vulnerable countries, are often the ones paying the highest price compared to what they've actually not even emitted that much of carbon emissions in the atmosphere. So finance ensures that they are not left behind, is to say. And this is about international space, even within countries, the the populations which are below poverty, they have not contributed to emissions, but still, when it comes to paying for the damages of it, they are made to pay more. So inequality is one, I would say, effect of climate change that we have to solve, and finance comes in handy for that. Next slide, please. So what is climate finance? Now this is where things get a little messy. Okay, so believe it or not, but the UNFCCC has close to 200 members now. It's, to be precise, 196 or 187. The US keeps leaving the Paris Agreement, so I'm not sure of the number right now. Currently, there is no single agreed definition of climate finance. No, there is no technical agreement. No UNFCCC agreement can say that this is the definition of climate finance. The funny part is that currently the UNFCCC's website has a frequently asked question section which has a definition of climate finance, and that's what we refer in all the talks and all the research that we do. So climate finance, to put simply, is money that is raised either internationally, nationally, or locally for projects that are specific to mitigation and adaptation. Now, questions will come to you that what do you mean by mitigation and adaptation? I'm sure many of you must be aware, but to put it very simply, and this is one concept that has been confusing for me when I began my career in this subject. So, mitigation is all about reducing emissions. You can think about solar panels, electric vehicles, or energy efficiency. So, what they're doing is they're reducing emissions. Adaptation is about reducing vulnerability. So, think about having defenses against flood, drought resistant crops, cyclone shelters. So, this is what adaptation is. Although there's a lot of overlap which happens, for example, you can plant a lot of trees in an area and they can act as improving the soil health, but also trees can act as carbon sinks. So there's an overlap that can happen between mitigation and adaptation, but overall this is the broader difference between the two. If I may say, mitigation is like fixing the leaking tap, and adaptation is having well maintained drainage system so that your house doesn't flood. And you need both of them. One without the other just doesn't work. But without knowing that what is not climate finance, we cannot understand what is climate finance. So what is not climate finance? Commercial loans at market rates, export credits, or military aid. Believe it or not, but some countries have once tried to count military aid as climate finance. So that is how grim the situation is. And definitions matter, because they shape trust. If one country says that, hey, we gave you $10 billion, but the receiving side says that,
Welcome.
wait, but half of that was a loan that we'll be repaying with interest to you. So you can see that how arguments start in negotiations. Can we have the next slide? So these basically, what are the sources of climate finance and what are the channels through which climate finance flows? Broadly, they are public, private. MDBs are multilateral development banks like the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, New Development Bank. You know the list. And philanthropy is another source through which climate finance can flow. What are the channels through which it flows? It can be grants. Grants are basically, I don't know if it's the right word, but you can call it charity. Giving money to someone without any conditionalities, without expecting anything in return. So those are grants. Concessional loans is another one. Concessional loans is giving out loans at a lower interest rate. Then you have guarantees. Then you have green bonds and blended finance. All of these concepts you'll go through over the weeks of your course, and you'll try to learn what they are and how can they help in delivering climate finance. Blended finance is basically the mix of public and private money. Now think of it as climate finance plumbing system, different taps, different pipes, but hopefully all leading to the same outcome, which is financing climate action. I'll show you one graph by Climate Policy Initiative now. Can we have the next slide? So when it comes to climate finance, this diagram is very well used in a lot of research and reports. You can take a screenshot of it. It might be helpful for you. And yeah, before I forget, I mean, all the sessions that you'll have, please do write it down. A lot of things will go over your head. I mean, this has happened with me, but just try writing things down so that you can go back and reflect on what was, presented to you. So this talks about that where the money is coming from, how is it coming, where is it going? And you can see that the blue part of it is talking about public finance, the orange part of it is talking about private finance. You have state budgets through which finance flows, you have grants, you have project level market rate debt, and you can see the sectors on the right hand side. You can see that energy systems receive the highest amount of climate finance that there is. But what you can also see is that the total climate finance right now is $1.9 trillion. But that is not enough. That is not even 25% of what we require right now, globally speaking. And again, you can refer to this diagram any day. You can take a screenshot. Can we have the next slide? This is to give you a context of where the money is flowing. The darker it is, the more money is flowing there. You can see China is almost black here. Most amount of money is flowing there because of their policies that they have. Electric vehicles is counted as somewhere climate finance, although it is green finance. Then you can see USA, Canada, and Latin America. All these you can again take a screenshot of this. So this will tell you the depth of the climate finance that is moving across geographies. But the point being, the world is one. We are all being affected by climate change in different ways, some which are being affected more compared to others. But if you can see that Africa as a region, then South Asia as a region, and Southeast Asia as a region, these are geography located in a place and historically at a place where they are vulnerable and the least amount of money is flowing there. This can tell you the disparity and again the sad reality that where the money is actually needed, it's not going there. This can just give you a brief example about that. Can we have the next slide? So this is the most, I would say, talkable thing in climate finance, the $100 billion pledge. Now, this is the most famous story in climate finance. Taking you back in COP15 in Copenhagen 2009, the developed countries pledged to mobilize $100 billion a year by 2020. And this number was not based on science. It was only a political promise. It was a trust building gesture. Like I spoke about in the first slide, that it's also about trust. But the Paris Agreement, which is the very famous agreement that took place in, like the name suggests, Paris, in 2015, extended this promise through 2025 because it was not met. But now here is a twist. The OECD, which you must know what it is, says that the goal of $100 billion was met in 2022. All right. So this is basically run by the developed countries. And they said that by 2022, we had given out $100 billion. But now the interesting part is now comes the Oxfam report. The Oxfam report says that the real number out of this $100 billion, which was actually climate finance, was only 21 to $24 billion. The majority part of it was loans. Now, let's get this fact straight. The countries who require climate finance and are vulnerable are not in the best economic status, right? Most of them are on the verge of debt crisis. Now, if you're giving them loans on market rates, that is further pushing them into a debt crisis, which is not good for them. I mean, it's self-explanatory. I don't need to stress on that. And depending on who you ask, the glass is either full or half empty or almost empty, some people say. But the big lesson, the $100 billion was less about the money and more about the trust. And this gap has exposed problems of definition, transparency, and fairness. Can we have the next slide? This is the subgroup that I already spoke about this. Can we have the next slide, please? So now the next thing, what's next? The Paris Agreement also said that before 2025, you have to come out with a new climate finance goal. And this is where NCQG, aka New Collective Quantified Goal, was agreed upon. I was there in the room in Baku when negotiations were happening. Trust me, some of you who have got a chance to know about these negotiations or will get a chance this year to be at COP30, it's a super dramatic space. And I'm not joking, I'm not mocking anyone, but as a diplomacy student, I've read about these things, but seeing them firsthand really opened my eyes. These things are super dramatic. Developed versus developing is actually a thing, and it's very dramatic. So, all right. So, at COP29, developed countries had agreed upon $300 billion a year till 2035. Now, I'll tell you the funny part. The negotiations started with a figure of $1.3 trillion by 2030. The negotiations went on for 2 weeks. For 80% of the days, the figure remained the same, the deadline remained the same. Just 3 days back of the final day of COP29, the figure was reduced from $1.3 trillion to $250 billion, and the timeline was extended from 2030 to 2035. So you're seeing that the amount has been reduced, the timeline has been pushed forward, which can give you a real picture of what the intent is in the room. But again, after some hours of negotiations, it was brought from 250 to $300 billion. So that is where we stand right now. The agreed amount is $300 billion by 2035. But after the COP was ended, developing countries called it an optical illusion. The fight is not only about scale now, it's also about the quality of finance. What do I mean by quality of finance? Again, like I said, it should not be market rate debts. It should not be debt inducing in the sense that it should not push countries further into debt and actually fund climate projects because that's what we need. So the presidencies at COP29 and the future presidency, which is now COP30, they came up with a Baku to Belém roadmap. Baku was where the COP29 was held, and Belém is where it will be held this year. So they have created a roadmap. I mean, not yet created, but they want to create a roadmap, and consultations are happening for that. They want to push this figure from 300 to $1.3 trillion dollars. And for that, consultations are happening. We at Youngo are also part of these consultations. We submit our positions. We push for the right things that please give us climate finance and not any kind of finance, which can further put countries and regions into debt. So now the debates are not just about the scale. Like I said, it's quality, but it's also predictability. Can countries plan with it, or is it only uncertain? Because that makes things worse. Access. Do small, vulnerable countries actually get it, or does it stay logged in paperwork? And that's the story that we are heading into at COP30 next year. I'll close off my part now, and after this, Catherine will take over. But before that, so what's the takeaway from this? Climate finance is more than just money. It's about trust between nations. It's about justice for the vulnerable. It's about the credibility of climate ambition itself. And that's why whether you're a negotiator, banker, policymaker, the first question you should always ask about climate ambition is where's the money? Because without the money, even the best climate plan is just a dream, a big ambition. So I'll close off here and I'll ask Catherine to take over from this slide. Catherine, are you there? And please don't mind my floating head because the lighting is not very good. Kiara, can you please ask Catherine to take on? Sorry for the delay, guys. This is the reality. The delay that you're seeing here is actually the delay that is for climate finance itself. So it's like a real exposure simulation for you. Just bear with us for a few seconds and we'll get Catherine on the call.
Yes, we're having a bit of technical issues with her microphone, but we will get that fixed right now.
Okay. Hi, can we all hear
There we
me?
go.
Yes,
Can we
yes,
hear me?
yes. We are
Okay.
getting you.
All right, that's good. Okay, all right. Okay, good. So I'm starting. My name is Catherine Suter. I will give us a brief background to me. My name is Catherine Suter. I'm a Pan-African organization. Currently, I'm at Duke University. I'm studying a Master of Environmental Management at Duke University with a major in Business and Environment and Energy and Environment. So, with the YOUNGO Climate and Finance team, I'm the onboarding or recruitment coordinator. So, I'm hoping that as all of us are on this call, we've already attended an onboarding session before. If you haven't, we'll be hosting one on Saturday. I would confirm the timings and then we can move from there. So I am speaking today about basically about the rules, responsibilities, and practices of climate finance. I joined a few breakout rooms and I understand that most of us may have some experience and some knowledge of climate finance, if not all of us. And I think Shitties has also given a brief background. So basically, I'm in layman's terms, what I'm talking about is the rules that govern how money flows, who is responsible for what, and why it's not working as it should. We all know that last year COP29 focused heavily on finance. It was even called the Finance COP. So moving to Bedem, we would like to discuss a few things about climate finance. So I'll speak about Article 2.1c. So let's all think of Article 2.1c as the most ambitious part of the Paris Agreement. This is not just about getting some climate money, it's about flipping the entire global financial system. Right now, the world still invests more in fossil fuels than renewables globally. And Article 2.1c is trying to change that. So if you really see my slide, you see that there's something that I've written there, the core challenge. So it's about the Paris Agreement and it's about making finance flows consistent with low emission pathways. That's what Article 2.1c is trying to do. But the current reality is that $2.4 million trillion, there's a $2.4 million trillion annual gap between climate needs and the flows. So the world needs $2.4 trillion to achieve this gap that we are experiencing. And also most finance mechanisms still support fossil fuel infrastructure, which is what we are trying not to do. So we are looking at some implementation tools that we think would help us achieve Article 2.1c. The first thing that we are looking at is the TCFD mandatory reporting. TCFD is the task force on climate related financial disclosures. So this is where an initiative that creates a framework for organizations to disclose information about climate related risks and opportunities. Also, the taxonomies, there are certain taxonomies, how we expect certain countries to be taxed, etc. So we have the EU model. Along the course, I'm sure that we'll dive deeper into that, and then national variations, nations such as China, Korea, how the taxonomies will work out there. Also, we have certain regulations that are being put in place with central banks integrating climate risks into prudential rules. So realize that certain banks are taking on climate and related disclosures, etc. So I want us to use this analogy. I want to make it very simple for all of us because lots of people, whenever they join my onboarding calls, they all say climate finance feels so technical, etc. So let's use this analogy that you're trying to fill a bathtub while the drain is still open. So literally, we are adding green finance, but we haven't stopped the brown finance yet. And for TCFD, simply put, it's now companies have to tell investors that yes, how climate change could bankrupt us. And that will change everything. That will change the outlook that the investor will have in relating with the company. On the taxonomies, where I spoke about the EU model, China, Korea, other nations, it's like having a nutrition label for investment so that before a company invest in a nation invest in certain things, they know that is this project actually green or is just greenwashed, right? I hope that probably gives some really layman definitions on these things. So I'm also sure that some of us work for organizations that have to do climate disclosures. I know that with banks and co, even back home in Ghana, they've had to start doing climate disclosures. So please, can you move me to the next article? So Article 6, we are going to talk about carbon market. So Article 6 is basically 3 different ways countries can cooperate on climate action instead of doing it alone. So Article 6.2 is bilateral trading. This is where climate countries trade mitigation outcomes to meet NDCs. We all know that NDCs are the national development contributions. Then also with Article 6.2, because this doesn't involve just one country, but maybe bilateral, like the name suggests, 2 or more, it requires corresponding adjustment to avoid double counting mechanism. So, for example, let's look at Article 6.2 like this, like international trading. Brazil protects the forest, the Amazon forest, and then sells credits to Germany, because Germany does a lot of emissions and cool because of their large industries that they have. So when Brazil protects the forest, now they have a lot of credit and then they sell to Germany. Let's move to Article 6.4. Article 6.4 is UN crediting. So this is a successor to CDM. CDM is clean development mechanisms with stronger oversight. CDM was brought up at the Kyoto Protocol, like 1994 or so. So in Article 6.4, with the UN crediting system, 5% of proceeds are sent to the adaptation fund. And then let's look at Article 6.4 this way, that countries are supposed to buy and sell credit, but it's a UN supervised version of that. So think of it as a buying and selling, a market where they buy and sell carbon credit, but it has a referee. So then it's more regulated and supervised. So we move to Article 6.8, that's non-market. So where there's technology transfer, capacity building, South-South cooperation, and no credit generation. So yeah, we don't use any buying or selling of credit, but we are looking at direct climate action support. So we can look at Article 6.8 as everything else except credit, sharing technology, building capacity. So no money exchanging hands in Article 6.8 focus. So the critical issues that will be discussed later as we move along the academy, we'll speak about environmental integrity. We'll speak about host country consent, especially with buying and selling of credit, sustainable development co-benefit, and baseline methodologies to achieve the carbon market mechanisms that we are looking to do. So please move me to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So developed country finance. So this is where things get political. Rich countries promise $100 billion a year by 2020, and we are still short. So the developed countries promise to give the developing countries $100 billion a year, but we've not achieved our targets yet, and developing countries are not happy about it. So the current commitments fall short. We said that would give developing countries $100 billion by 2020. We've had to extend it to 2025 due to the shortfall. And now we are even short of $17 billion annually. As at 2022, we're short of $17 billion annually. So we realized that for the $100 billion goal, the composition was supposed to be $35 billion public funds and $65 billion mobilized private funds, but it's still not been achieved. Then we moved to public versus private finance. So with public funds, we are looking at budget allocations, DFI lendings that can fund adaptation projects and loss and damage LDCs. With private finance, we are looking at they should be market-driven, risk-return focused, and should mainly fund mitigation measures in credit-worthy countries. Then we have the blended finance mechanism. That's the public versus the private put together. So this is a de-risking mechanism. It has guarantees, first loss provision, etc. Then we move to accountability challenges. Certain challenges we are facing is that there's no agreed definition of climate finance as of now. Also, when it comes to the bilateral and multilateral channels, we tend to face challenges of double counting, and there's also limited transparency in private finance attribution. So this leads to debates of geographic distribution, complexity in access, the equivalence of grants, etc. So there are certain debates that have come up. And before you move on, I'll just speak a bit. So we realize that the real fight isn't just about the amount, it's about what counts and who controls it. So sometimes we ask ourselves that what would you prioritize? Would you prioritize having more money or easier access to existing money? There are certain debates that have come up, certain questions that I'll just throw to the audience. We can answer them later. Is a loan the same as a grant when you're a vulnerable island nation? For example, if a developed country like Germany gives a loan money to a country in the seed zone, is it a loan or is it a grant? If, for example, Germany gives BMW a tax break to build an electric car factory in Kenya, would we term that climate finance? Also, we would ask ourselves, why does it take 3 years and 200 pages of paperwork for Malawi to get $2 million for solar panels? We realize that there are so many challenges and bottlenecks to achieving the developed country finance goals. So please move me to the next slide where I'll speak about FFD for development finance architecture. So we realize that climate finance doesn't exist in a vacuum. You can't talk about climate money without talking about the debt crisis. So see on my slide, I would like to paint this picture first of all. So imagine your house is flooding, but you're already maxed out on credit card. This is the reality of many developing countries. And yet they need $4 trillion for all development goals, but countries can barely save existing debt. You're already drowning in debt, and yet you need more money to achieve certain things. So that's the whole picture when it comes to the development finance context of this argument. So climate without broader development, like I just mentioned, there's an SDG financing gap. We need $4 trillion annually. And even with this $4 trillion, climate is just a subset of it. Policy coherence, climate action intersects all development goals. We realize that climate has become a part and parcel of our lives. And so even in policy making, even in national discussions, stakeholder engagement, etc., climate action needs to be taken to achieve certain development goals. And we also need systemic approach that's needed beyond project by project funding. So we'll speak about debt and fiscal space crisis. There are 60 plus developing countries that are risks of debt distress. Climate vulnerability correlates with debt burden. So the higher the vulnerability of a nation to climate crisis like floods, etc., we realize that these nations tend to be nations that drown in more debt. So, what are the solutions to this? We think that we need debt for climate swaps, disaster clauses, payment suspensions, etc. Let's speak about systemic reform agenda. MDB modernization. MDB is multilateral development banks. So we are saying that multilateral development banks can take on measures such as triple lending capacity, lend more, risk appetites, country platforms. Innovative instruments can be used, such as SDR rechanneling, global solidarity levies, etc. We'll go more into details of these technicalities as we move about. Domestic resources, international tax cooperation, illicit flow prevention. So we are looking for more multilateral and bilateral collaborations between nations, companies, etc. So that's why we are seeing creative approaches because there's a lot of debt. We're seeing creative approaches such as debt for climate swaps, where countries get debt relief for protecting for the forest. I think we spoke earlier about Brazil. And also, one of the key points that we should notice is that the infrastructure that moves money around the world, this whole infrastructure started in 1944. So we are trying to solve 2025 problems with 1944 plumbing. And that's really a big issue of why we are facing so many challenges moving on. Please move me to the next slide, adaptation finance. I'll be wrapping up in a minute. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at adaptation like this. Adaptation is like insurance. You need it most when you can afford it the least, and it's hard to make money from it. Basically, adaptation is like insurance. When you need it the most. Oh, somebody, please, am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
Catherine.
Okay. Someone said I
Yes,
wasn't.
yes.
Okay, so adaptation is like insurance. You need it the most when you can afford it the least, and it's hard to make money from it. So that's really what adaptation finance is about. So let's use this example. Imagine if disaster relief was designed by people who have never experienced that disaster using a one size fits all approach. Will they work? Obviously, no. Because to be able to make a solution for something like a disaster, you mostly have to have experienced it. So that's all what we are trying to move away from. That's what the whole layman idea behind adaptation finance. So come back to the slide. We speak about the funding gap. Only 28% of climate finance goals have been achieved. The annual need, we need between $215 billion to 300 and okay, someone sent a question. Bernard Mashwak. I would answer this question in a minute. Or Chiro, anyone would do so. So we need between $215 billion to $387 billion by 2030 to achieve to close this gap. And like I mentioned earlier, we've only received $28 billion. That's a very huge deficit out there. And we also realized that I think earlier Shiti spoke about the quality of the funds. Only 69% have come as loans versus adaptations, public goods, nature. I think I spoke earlier about loans and grants. Why is adaptation underfunded? Because of economic character. Yes, somebody said, Baba, that's a good example. Thank you. Why is adaptation underfunded? Because of economic characteristics such as public goods nature, no revenue generation, positive externalities. Markets fade where there are uncertain returns. It's difficult to measure the impact, and there are long payback method periods. And like I mentioned, it's like an insurance. No one really wants the money to go and be stuck in a place where they can't make money from. Also, institutional bias, financial system preference for large scale activities and standardized mitigation project. Risk perception. Countries perceive adaptations have a higher risk due to local specificity and context dependency. This is in relation to locally led adaptation. So I move back down to locally led adaptation. So community ownerships. This is where local organizations drive adaptation planning and implementation. Talk about indigenous knowledge, where there's an integration of traditional ecological knowledge with scientific approaches. Also, with locally led adaptation, we look at cultural appropriateness, solutions that fit local, social, and economic context because these are specific to certain people and places. It's not global. So it's not a one size fits all. And sustainability, we need to build local capacity to ensure long-term project success and maintenance. Also, with locally led adaptation, we need to consider equity, where there's direct access to ensure benefits reaches the most vulnerable population. So we speak about access challenges for vulnerable countries. First of all, there are institutional barriers. There's a complex 2.2 to 7 year accreditation process for climate funds. Small countries need years just to qualify for funding. And over these years, they will still be experiencing climate challenges. So by the time they would even be accredited to process these funds, they may have wallowed deeper and deeper into the climate crisis. There's limited project development and management capabilities, lack of staff trained in international project standards, transaction costs. There are high overhead costs relative to project size. It mostly exceeds 50% for small projects, and there's more time and money spent on paperwork than actual climate crisis, which is a big issue that we are facing, not only in relation to vulnerable countries, but globally. Fiduciary standards. International requirements normally don't match local institutional context, expecting developing countries most of the time. For example, expecting developing countries NGOs to meet Swiss bank standards. That's absurd. Also, we realized that there are issues of scale mismatch where large fund minimum sizes, there's a small scale adaptation need. So climate funds probably want to give $50 million plus, but communities just require $500,000 for these projects. Language and cultural barriers. Proposal requirements often favor English speaking Western trained staff, when most of the time some of these small countries that may need these funds, etc., may not be too good with the donor language, but rather their local language, which can create a barrier. So, for example, there are certain examples that I would give on how of adaptation finance. For example, a farmer switching to a drought-resistant crop can't sell adaptation credits because he's not being able to secure enough credits. No, a farmer can't sell adaptation credits because he's not an organization, he's not a nation. Seawalls don't generate revenues like solar panels do. Community early warning systems would save lives, but they don't private investment. These are some of the issues that we face when it comes to adaptation finance. I think please move me to the next slide. I think there's something we should take note of, that less than 10% of adaptation finance reaches local communities directly. The rest of adaptation finance gets stuck in the institutional middle of paperwork, etc. So, in as much as these vulnerable communities need to be reached with adaptation finance, we realize that they receive less than 10% of it, which is woefully low. So there are four key takeaways that I would like us to take from this presentation. What practitioners need to know for financial institutions, for government, for projects, and for all of us. So for government, we realize that for financial institutions, they need to implement climate disclosure frameworks. I spoke about TCFD and ISBB standards earlier. And financial institutions also need to learn to align portfolios with 1.5 degrees Celsius scenarios. Also, financial institutions need to develop transition finance products for hard to abate sectors. This is one of the ways that financial institutions will be able to achieve climate finance goals moving forward. For governments need to strengthen MRV systems for climate finance tracking. That's really important. They need to create enabling policy environment for private investors. Also, governments needs to build institutional capacity for fund access and management. For project development, project developers project developers need to focus on environmental integrity and sustainable development co-benefit. Need to engage communities, especially the local communities, from design through to implementation. They need to build local technical capacity for long-term sustainability. For climate finance to succeed, for climate finance to succeed, we need political will, technical innovation, institutional coordination, and community engagement. Yes, I've come to the end of my presentation. I'm sure that we'll engage further in subsequent classes. Also, if you're not on the onboarding group, I will drop the link in the chat room and please join. If you've not yet joined an onboarding call, please make sure to do so. It will give you more insight. Thank you.
All right. Now that I have a background and better lighting, and also that you've learned about mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and debt relief, and all of these things, market mechanisms, we have a small quiz for you. If Sophia, you can move on to the next slide. All right. So just to get a sense of if you're still here, can you please react something on the call to let us know that you're still on the call? I can see some cameras turning off. Okay. We're still here then. Perfect. Okay. So the question is that imagine that you're negotiators, climate talks, and you suddenly have $100 million. Now you have to allocate. The question is, where would you direct it first? And the options you have are mitigation, adaptation, debt relief, or market mechanisms. So you can put your answer in the chat and write. You have to choose one. Alright, so I'm really glad that adaptation is winning the race here. Although, just to break it out for you, there's no right answer. It depends upon the geography that you are in, depends upon the economic status that your country has, it depends upon what type of climate risk that your country or geography faces. So it's to give you a brief that these are exactly the kind of trade-offs that countries debate in negotiations that happen at COPs and have been happening for 30 years now. This will be 30th edition. And this also shows that why the new collective quantified goal that I spoke about is so important. If the goal is too small or hard to access, none of these priorities can be funded properly. And scale and access are at the heart of this. And also what Catherine told you, right? It's also highlighting that why rules and responsibilities matter. Why Article 2.1c, Article 6, public finance obligations are about making sure that these flows are not just given, but they're aligned, accountable, and actually reach adaptation and resilience. I'm really happy that all of you, most of you, chose that, but again, the others are also equally important. So, what we've tried to gather today is that climate finance is not just about technicalities, it's not regular finance, but it's more than just numbers. It's about the commitments, it's about rules, and also about fairness. I hope that the call was engaging enough for all of you and we could learn something out of it, and we are always open to connecting with you, all of us at YOUNGO. And we would love to have any questions that you have now. We'll have around, I think, 5 minutes if I'm not wrong. Kiara, you can take over from. Kiara, you can take over.
Okay, I'll ask the questions and then you can respond. Let's see. There's a question from Sharon in the chat asking, given the rapid growth of dual benefit adaptation plus mitigation projects, what are the biggest design challenges in making them attractive to both public and private investors?
Where I can't see this question. Is it on the chat?
Yes, in the chat.
Can you repeat it once again? I can't see it for some reason.
Yes, given the rapid growth of dual benefit, meaning adaptation plus mitigation projects, what are the biggest design challenges in making them attractive to both public and private investors?
Oh, so the biggest challenge is first of all to have these overlapping projects. That's first. But if you have managed to do it, you also have to see that every country has different definitions. So, we talk about the concept of economies here. What taxonomies basically do is they give out definitions of what is adaptation, what is mitigation, what is climate, what is green, what is not green. For example, if you've managed to pull out a multi-purpose project in a country, let's say India, and now you want financing for that, it makes things easy for you. And this thing has been doing rounds in the climate finance circles, that because the whole climate finance is skewed more towards mitigation. I can give you India's example just for this case here, that the current annual climate finance flows average are around, uh, I think 170. It's $50 billion, and what we require is $170 billion. But the funny part is that out of this $50 billion, more than 80% is mitigation. So you can see that it's going more towards mitigation because that has a better business case. But if you can manage to say that this project is solving both mitigation and adaptation, what you'll do by that is also get money for adaptation. And this is where this becomes easy for private investors because mitigation has a good business case for them, that has profitability for them. And if you can combine both of them, you can attract public capital. Then you can go to an investor or you can go to a philanthropist and say that we have the first loss guarantee. You can use instruments like blended finance. You can use instruments like public-private partnerships. And a new instrument is coming up now called CFD. What CFD does is it tries to have a parity and certainty in the price of renewable energy. So there are different instruments that you can approach for de-risking that investment and taking that project to the government or the private capital to get the financing. But the crux of it is, if you can make a case for a double project, an overlapping project, it will always be beneficial to get money for adaptation. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Shitis. And one more question because we have the time. Nuravni Salins in the chat is asking if carbon credits are also climate finance.
My God, that's a question that we're also looking an answer for. And like I said, the definition is where things get messy. Again, I think I should have told you this earlier, but again, to give you a bracket of what different definitions are, you have sustainable finance, which is the broadest bracket. Then you have green finance, which is a slightly narrower bracket than that. Then you have climate finance. So these three are in order. Now, under climate finance, you can say that you have carbon finance, but this is all that negotiations are played around. There's now a fight that is carbon finance actually climate finance? Is it actually going towards the projects that actually need it, or is it just trading of credits and making profits out of it? I would choose not to say anything on that because, again, this is something that is still being developed. And at COP30, Article 6 will be one of the negotiating points. But I think all I can tell you is as long as the climate projects are well defined, they are well structured, the money that is flowing into the projects because of carbon credits has a long-term impact. It is climate finance. Like I said, the end goal is to meet climate ambitions. And if that's being done, you can say anything as climate finance. But again, if you're just trading credits, making profits, and putting them into a thermal power plant and saying that we are supporting fossil fuels, that is not climate finance. So that's all I can tell you on that. I don't want to end up in any controversies by putting any comment on carbon finance versus climate finance thing, but I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. And just one more because I found it in the chat and I think it's really relevant. Sinjini is asking, how would one differentiate between climate finance, green finance, etc., and other financing under the same umbrella?
Under the same umbrella, I'm not sure. And I'm so happy, first of all, that we are focusing on definitions because I don't know why the
Hi,
conversations are not
Kimberly.
happening. I think that was by mistake from someone. But again, coming back, I'm happy that the talk is about definitions because that is the most important thing. And although as many negotiations as you can have on climate finance, carbon markets, but you have to take a step back and talk about what is climate finance. I think one bracket which can entail both climate, green, carbon, ESG funds, green bonds, sovereign bonds is sustainable finance. So sustainable finance is the broadest bracket of all. Like I said before, that you can remember three categories: sustainable, under that green, and under that climate. Differentiation between all three of them is sustainable finance will also include financing electric vehicles. It will also include financing poverty programs. It will also include funding hunger programs because that is sustainable. Sustainability is not just climate; it's a way of the economy. It's a way of living. Under that, you have green finance. Green finance will definitely not include poverty and hunger programs, but it will include EVs. It will include biodiversity, afforestation, and improving soil health and all of that. A very specific bracket is climate finance, which deals with only two kinds of projects, which is adaptation and mitigation. And I've told you the difference between that. I hope that you wrote it down. I'll say it again. Mitigation is reducing emissions, and adaptation is reducing vulnerability. So this is the kind of differentiation that we have.
Thank you so much, Shitis. So we don't have any more time for questions, but I just want to say a huge thank you to both Catherine and Shitis for their presentation. It really sets the foundation to what you will all be learning over the next couple of months. As Catherine mentioned as well, she is the onboarding coordinator of the Finance and Markets Working Group. So if you do want to join the YOUNGO working group, please, she sent a link and you can also send her a message privately to find out more information. So we will now, if it has not yet been sent, send an attendance link into the chat. We do monitor attendance for every single session, so you do have to fill in the link so we know that you're present and that you fulfill the 80% attendance needed for the academy. If it has not been sent, it will be sent now by our tech team. It will be open for another hour after this meeting closes, so you don't have to do it right now. You have an hour before it closes. Another next step that we have is that our next session will take place on Tuesday, the 16th of September at 12 a.m. UTC, midnight. So please double check your local time zone and make sure that you've added the Academy calendar so that you don't miss it. The calendar has all the Zoom links and passwords included, and also we will share with you this presentation in PDF format along with the recording for you to watch it again if you want. Has the attendance been sent? The attendance has not been sent. Okay, we will send it right now within the next 1 or 2 minutes, so don't leave yet. Well, yeah. Okay. And so with that, as you wait for the attendance, we've come to the close of the first session of the 2025 Climate Finance Academy. I want to say a huge thank you to all the speakers today for their insights and for your energy and participation. This is just the beginning of a truly exciting journey, and the real strength of the Academy comes from the diversity and the passion that each of you brings. So on behalf of the YOUNGO Finance and Markets Working Group team, thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you in our next session.